Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
I would hate to see this year the same level of disruption in our classrooms because of the decisions that adults made. Our students deserve better.
With some kids in the country already back in class, the Biden administration is trying to keep them there, bringing vaccinations to both sports and the PTA. The CDC's newest eviction ban may be short-lived. A federal judge giving the Biden administration until tomorrow to respond to a motion to block it. And it's a bronze medal for the U.S. women's national soccer team, the incredible kick that helped them beat Australia. We begin with NBC News correspondent Heidi Przybilla in Washington, D.C. She was the first to report the Biden administration's new plan to get more kids vaccinated. So, Heidi, tell us, what is the White House strategy now?
Yeah, Allison, we have a pretty small window to address what is really a big disparity in vaccination rates among children ages 12 to 17. Only about 29% fully vaccinated. So the Biden administration says it is making an all-out effort in this final sprint before schools reopen, including working together with the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as huge sports organizations, including the National Olympic Committee, to try and push new guidelines and even new forms to pediatricians across the country who are conducting mandatory physicals on kids who want to participate in sports. That could be very effective, given that an estimated 60 to 70% of school children do participate, Allison, in team sports. Secondly, getting the word out to thousands of PTAs, parent-teacher associations across the country, that will be having those all-important first meetings where they want to parachute in pediatricians to underscore the importance to parents of these vaccines. But, Allison, the Education Secretary also underscoring to us in our exclusive interview just the significant barrier that politics is proven, given that a lot of the parents who were the most vocal about school lockdowns, about mental health, about learning losses, are now the very parents who are fighting these mask mandates and vaccines, which could prevent their children from the same fate this fall, Allison.
So, Heidi, look, one thing we know, right? Public health officials say masks are one of the best ways to stop the coronavirus from spreading, especially when we're talking about young people, many of whom can't get vaccinated. But some states are saying that schools can't require masking. These states also have some of the lowest vaccination rates. What do health officials fear will happen if we can't drive up these vaccination rates before kids go back to school? And as you've said, this window is so small.
Yeah, Allison, and it's not an insignificant number. NBC counted at least 9 states that fall into this category. And let me just throw up a couple of maps here for reference so you can visualize what epidemiologists are calling the perfect back-to-school storm. On the left-hand side, you see the rate of spread of COVID heavily concentrated there in the U.S. Southeast. You also see on the right-hand side, that's the same areas where you have very low vaccination rates among children ages 12 to 17. Those are also overlapping their states like Arkansas, Florida, Oklahoma, that have those bans on mask mandates, Allison. And so what the epidemiologists are saying is we already have the answer to what is likely to happen here, because Israel did the same thing last year. They reopened, didn't mandate masks in some schools, and they very quickly got outbreaks, had to close again. Epidemiologists I talked to say that this could happen in some of these areas in as little as 3 weeks.
What a trooper.
Heidi, separately, Vice President Harris, the second gentleman, Dr. Fauci, they're all kicking off a week of action to encourage vaccinations for kids. Tell us more about what they're doing.
Yeah, all part of the week of action, the initiatives that I just outlined, as well as encouraging schools and local school districts to host pop-up clinics. They're also funneling more resources towards those schools and guidelines about how to host these clinics, but also acknowledging, Allison, that a lot of this really has to take place on the local level, and that it's up to local officials to get out there and demonstrate to their citizens and these parents not only that the vaccine is important, but that masking is important. Because, Allison, I don't think that map even demonstrates the full extent of the problem here. I've spoken with officials, for instance, in Indiana, who they don't have a mask mandate ban, and yet some of the officials there feel intimidated to say you got to mask up because they feel that they lost students because their parents were angry about it when they did it last fall.
Yeah, this is a really tough problem for these schools, Heidi. As you said, we can't overemphasize how difficult the challenges are and what they're dealing with. Thank you so very much for reporting today. The kids went back to school in Atlanta today. Public schools there requiring students to wear masks. City and state leaders in Georgia still at odds over mask mandates, while COVID cases in kids are going up across the country. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck is at E. Rivers Elementary School in Atlanta.
Well, Allison, here in the city of Atlanta, one of the largest school districts in the country, students are heading back into the classroom today, and they are required to wear masks indoors. That is part of a citywide mask mandate here in the city of Atlanta, but it is confusing among other parts of the state in terms of mixed messages. The governor here in Georgia has said he does not support mask mandates and will not be putting one in place. Also, just 10 miles from where we are standing in a suburb of Cobb County, that school district has opted to make it optional for students to wear masks in this school year. But here in Atlanta, we talked to parents headed in today, and many were, having a sigh of relief over this. They feel that that layer of safety is necessary with the rising cases of Delta variant circulating, especially in the state of Georgia. Here's what parents told us. How are you guys feeling about her wearing a mask today?
I'm really glad that they decided to make it mask mandatory. Much safer. It absolutely shows it prevents the spread, and there's no reason to expose the children to any unnecessary risk.
These kids are good to go. They wore masks all last year and are really comfortable, and we're just really excited that they're back in person.
We also spoke with Atlanta Public School Superintendent, who told us that there is still room for improvement when it comes to vaccination rates among her staff. Right now, that number is hovering about 59% of her staff fully vaccinated. And she says she hopes that throughout the school year, that number will increase. She's also hopeful that the student vaccination rate will increase. Right now, out of all eligible students for a vaccine in Atlanta Public Schools, only 18% have gotten the shot. Here's what the superintendent has to say about that.
Well, I think we have a responsibility to be prepared to have to pivot at any time as we observe the rise of the Delta variant. So number one, we all know how to pivot back into that virtual space that we did this past year.
Now, here in Atlanta, they will be doing surveillance testing when it comes to COVID within the schools. They also are going to offer vaccine sites at several schools throughout the district to try and make it easier for parents, students, and staff to get vaccinated. Allison?
Only a handful of ICU beds left in the entire state of Mississippi. COVID patients overwhelming the hospital system there. The state reporting more than 3,000 new cases Wednesday and 16 new deaths. Dr. Jonathan Wilson, Chief Administrative Officer and COVID-19 Incident Manager at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, joins me now. Dr. Wilson, I can't thank you enough. I can only imagine how busy you are. Yesterday, you said there were just 6 ICU beds available in the entire state. What's the status with those beds today? And what happens when Mississippi runs out of beds entirely?
Well, thank you, Allison. Status today, when we counted this morning, we were up to 8. So we gained 2 beds, but that's still far from the number that we would need for the entire state of Mississippi. Right now, we have a mitigation plan in place. We coordinate with our state health department a system of care, looking at all COVID-positive patients as well as any patient needing an ICU bed. And our communication center distributes those patients to hospitals that have open beds, and when all beds are full, we do a round robin of getting patients from smaller hospitals to larger hospitals, trying to equally distribute the patient load as best we can.
It sounds like an incredible challenge. First, let me say, though, that I'm glad to hear that the number of beds is trending in the right direction, even though, as you say, I know 8 isn't nearly enough. But could you describe for us what it's been like for you and your colleagues lately? Do you have enough staff to care for all the new COVID patients? I know you say you're trying to spread people out. What are the biggest challenges that you're dealing with trying to take care of all these people and literally having no place for them to go?
Well, you hit it right on the head, Allison. It's staffing, specifically nursing staff. We have a nursing shortage like most of the country, but that impacts all of our hospitals and health systems. So there aren't enough resources to call in. There's no cavalry coming over the hill. We have what we have, and we see an increasing demand of patient needs going up, and the staffing situation isn't improving. We're currently working on options of if we could find staff externally, federal government or other sources, how we could try to open empty beds. And we could do that pretty quickly with enough staff. We could easily accommodate the volume, probably pushing close to 100 new ICU beds in the state if we had infinite staffing resources, but that's just not the reality. The reality is we don't have enough staff, we don't have enough beds open, and we're doing the best we can to take care of all these patients.
Dr. Wilson, we got to talk about vaccination because we have said over and over again lately that this has become a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Mississippi has one of the lowest vaccination rates in the country. You're looking at there just 35%. Most of the COVID patients you're treating are unvaccinated. Why aren't they getting the shots? And once they've gotten sick, what are they telling you? Are they starting to see the vaccine's value?
Unfortunately, that is the case. As citizens are getting sick, you know, they wish they could get the vaccine, but at that point, it's a little too late. When you start getting severe disease, obviously the vaccine is not going to help you there. So there is a degree of remorse and regret from patients that have the disease that did not get vaccinated. But as far as the number that are not vaccinated, it's really befuddling to us. We know that we now have a safe and effective tool to defeat this virus, but we've just got to get shots in arms, and we have to try to get more of our citizens vaccinated, or else we're going to stay in this cycle. It'll be another wave. It'll be a gamma wave, a lambda wave, whatever else comes after Delta. It will keep propagating until we can reach enough vaccinated.
Well, look, you're here with us. You have a national, if not international, platform to share your message. What would you say to people, not just where you are, but across the country, around the globe, who are able to get a vaccine, who live in a country or a state where there are vaccines available, but they are simply not getting the shot? What would you tell them?
I would echo a quote, and I'll paraphrase from one of our flight crew members on the helicopter. As healthcare providers, we may be the last face you see if you aren't vaccinated and you get critically ill from COVID. Don't let us be the last face you see. Do everything you can in your power, and that includes getting vaccinated to defeat this virus. This is the only way out of this pandemic, is for us to get enough folks vaccinated for enough immunity to be able to defeat the virus.
Don't let an emergency worker, don't let a doctor, don't let them be the last face you see. A really powerful message. People should be living here. They should not be dying. We just keep hearing this over and over again. We've got a shot that can help. Dr. Wilson, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the important message and for all the work you do. I know your staff is working around the clock, and we are grateful for all of you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Allison.
A federal judge giving the government a Friday morning deadline after two groups of landlords filed a motion to stop the new CDC order prohibiting them from evicting tenants for another 60 days. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joining us now from Washington. Pete, this judge is indicating they will move pretty fast on this case. What happens tomorrow once the government responds?
So the government files its reply in the morning, and then the landlords file their reply in the evening, and then the judge will rule quite quickly on this. The problem for the government, of course, is that the last time this went through the courts, it wound up sort of before the Supreme Court. The court didn't take the case, but at least 5 justices indicated that the CDC probably didn't have the authority to do this on its own. Now, the government argues this time is different. It's not a nationwide ban. It's only in counties that have high rates of COVID with the new Delta variant, but it's still a pretty tall legal obstacle for the government.
So you said it, it's a legal obstacle. Many legal experts doubt that this moratorium will stand up in court. Even President Biden said earlier this week it may not pass constitutional muster. Is there any other path for renters if this eviction ban does not hold, or would that be the end of the line?
Well, no. I mean, they were hoping that Congress would do something, but Congress wasn't able to do it. Now, we should note that there still are state bans on evictions in 9 states. California, well, 8 states plus the District of Columbia. So California, D.C., Illinois, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, and Washington. But many of these are going to expire, some of them by the end of the month, some of them in the next few weeks. So the answer to the question fundamentally is no.
Pete, on a separate topic, today the Justice Department launched an investigation into the city of Phoenix and its police department to see if the police there violated any civil rights laws. What specifically are they looking at there?
So the Attorney General says this investigation will examine whether officers in Phoenix use excessive force, whether they engage in discriminatory policing, violate free expression, respond improperly to people with disabilities, and violate the rights of the homeless by seizing and disposing of their property. The Attorney General says the issue of how police respond to calls involving people with physical or mental disabilities is an important one, not just for Phoenix, but the rest of the country. He says our society is straining the policing profession by so often turning to law enforcement to address a wide variety of social problems. Too often, he says, we ask the police to be the first and last option for addressing issues that should not be handled by the criminal justice system. So this is the third of these so-called pattern or practice investigations. The other two are Minneapolis and Louisville.
All right, Pete Williams, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
You bet.
We've got a special treat for you today. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson is doing the headlines today. She has all the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Priscilla, take it away.
Hey, Allison, good to be back with you today. We start with news that labor leader Richard Trumka has died of a heart attack at age 72. Trumka had served as president of the AFL-CIO, one of the nation's largest labor unions, for more than a decade. Tributes are pouring in, with President Biden today saying Trumka was not only a great labor leader, but also a close friend. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also sharing his condolences on the Senate floor, saying, quote, "We lost a giant." In Northern California, the raging wildfire ripping through a historic mountain town. New video showing flames tearing through homes, vehicles, and businesses in Greenville. Residents were ordered to evacuate, and so far, no injuries reported. The Dixie Fire, which is currently the state's largest wildfire, has burned more than 320,000 acres since it began in mid-July. The investigation underway after a tragic crash in South Texas. Authorities say a van carrying 30 people crashed on a highway, killing at least 10 people, including the driver. 20 others were hospitalized. Police say the van was the only vehicle involved and believe that speed was a factor. Authorities now investigating whether the passengers were undocumented immigrants. And the Mexican government suing several U.S. gun makers in federal court. The suit accusing Smith & Wesson, Colt, Glock, and other prominent gun manufacturers of reckless business practices that supplied a, quote, torrent of illegal firearms to violent Mexican drug cartels, leading to thousands of deaths. The companies did not immediately respond to a request for comment. And President Biden with a new push to phase out gas cars. The president signing an executive order today setting a national goal for half of new vehicles to be electric by 2030. The president joined at the White House by executives from Ford and General Motors, as well as leaders from the United Auto Workers Union. White House officials say the executive order will also replace former President Trump's tailpipe and emission standards with stricter ones. Now, Allison, the president also took a joyride in one of those electric Jeeps after that press conference. An electric Jeep, can you believe it?
I know. I'm a Jeep owner myself, and I'm dying to see what those electric ones are all about. It looks like very much fun. And we know the president loves any opportunity he can to get behind the wheel of a car and take it for a spin. Yeah. Priscilla, thanks a million.
You bet.
I told him I did not see any way that he was going to be able to remain in office. And we need this state to be able to move ahead. And that's why I think it's so important that the governor at this point step aside.
The circle around New York Governor Andrew Cuomo getting smaller and smaller. New York's Democratic Party chair telling Cuomo to resign. Just one of the many voices demanding that Cuomo step aside or risk impeachment. Meanwhile, the governor himself silent. On Tuesday, the state's attorney general released a report that said Cuomo sexually harassed 11 women. Now at least 4 district attorneys across the state are opening their own inquiries into those allegations, and there could be a potential lawsuit from one of Cuomo's accusers. Here's NBC News senior national correspondent Kate Snow.
Allison, Governor Cuomo spent Wednesday holed up out of sight in Albany, New York, as more Democrats who once supported him now demand he step down. And a new Snap poll shows the majority of New York voters want that too.
It appears Andrew Cuomo's options may be running out as New York State Democrats issue a stark warning for their governor. Resign now or impeachment is inevitable.
Make no mistake, if he does not step down immediately, the legislature is prepared to move forward, and the votes are there comfortably for impeachment.
A longtime Cuomo loyalist, the head of New York's Democratic Party, urging him to step aside, saying in part, the party and this state will not be well served by a long, protracted removal process. If the state assembly does draw up articles of impeachment, Cuomo would have to temporarily step aside during a trial in the state Senate, something that hasn't happened there in over a century.
I called for the governor to resign because I do believe that we need to put this behind us and move forward in order to take care of New Yorkers and New York.
Governors in neighboring states who once partnered with Cuomo to combat the coronavirus now say it's over.
I'm appalled by the treatment that these women had to put up with. The governor has to resign.
Somebody in my administration had done that, they wouldn't be in my administration anymore.
The three-term governor also facing potential legal action, with a 165-page report from the state's attorney general laying out dozens of allegations, from unwanted physical contact to inappropriate and harassing comments. At least 4 county district attorneys in New York, where those alleged incidents took place, are now asking the AG for documents. A lawyer for accuser Lindsey Boylan says her client plans to file a civil suit against Cuomo and his close advisors for allegedly retaliating against her after she went public.
What does Lindsey want out of filing suit? Lindsey wants to file this lawsuit so other survivors understand that there is a path forward. She wants other survivors to know that this kind of retaliatory behavior is not okay.
Cuomo has repeatedly denied he ever touched anyone inappropriately and has apologized for making anyone feel uncomfortable. One of the only people, Allison, defending Governor Cuomo publicly, former New York City mayor and Trump confidant Rudy Giuliani. On Twitter, he said Cuomo may be guilty, but we used to have trials before convictions. Allison?
The culture of Cuomo's office enabled abuse. I saw it happen. Those are the words of NBC News and MSNBC political analyst and former special advisor to Governor Cuomo, Susan Del Percio. She wrote a think piece for NBC News this week called I Worked for Andrew Cuomo. New allegations made me rethink my own Albany experience. Susan joins me now. So, Susan, thanks so much for being here. You were appointed a special advisor to Cuomo back in 2014. You worked for him from 2014 to 2015. You say you never experienced or witnessed the governor sexually harass anyone, but you did see Cuomo belittle, demean, and bully staffers and government officials. You wrote, was this anything I haven't seen before? Nope. But instead, part of a pattern I had witnessed repeatedly throughout my 30 years in the business. Can you describe for our viewers what the culture was like up in Albany and tell us about some of the things you saw working for the governor?
Well, just my experience prior to working for the governor. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, Allison. So in my 20s and 30s, I heard the horrible stories of a lot of nonsense that happened up, I shouldn't call it nonsense, a lot of things that happened up in Albany and that were meant to stay up in Albany. But going in as a senior person into the governor's office, my eyes were open. I've never seen quite that yelling, that anger, the idea of retribution in an office before. And it just allowed a lot of things to fester. And when I read the parts of the AG report, one thing really stuck with me, and that was what we heard from the state trooper who said that Cuomo had unwantedly touched her. And remember, this is a woman that was wearing a gun at the time. And she was afraid. And fear is what dictated in that office. And the governor wanted you to always be afraid of him. I was in a little more unique situation because I had nothing to be afraid of. I was courted for that position. I took it, but I didn't know my career to the governor. And it's amazing what people would do in that office to hide, even if they were getting a new job, Allison. Imagine telling people, I'll let you know when I get there, out of fear that your current boss would try and sabotage you moving on in your career.
Yeah, that was one thing in your piece that really struck me when you wrote about that, thinking, wow, that really is fear. In his response to the AG's report this week, Governor Cuomo said this.
I have always said my office is a demanding place to work and that it is not for everyone.
Susan, you called that explanation disgraceful, but you also said that Cuomo's taped response denying all allegations was not surprising because no one does defiance like Cuomo. If you were still working as a special advisor to him right now, how would you have told him to handle that report this week? And what would you be saying to him now as more and more people, even President Biden, say he should just resign?
Well, after that report, I wouldn't be working for him if I had, at this point, if... even if I was working before. So, you know, it's what I advised him when he was, there was this, when I was there was the Moreland Commission, which was investigating corruption. It was a big thing over the governor's head. It became a big scandal. And I said, just tell them everything. You always want to put it all out and be honest. It's the only way, because otherwise everything comes out anyway. The governor just digs in. He's in the same situation of being under fire, which means he will just, like a turtle, just pull everything in and stay in his shell until and test the weather, you know, whether the water's okay to poke out again. My guess is, Allison, when he has until, I believe, next Friday, the 13th, to give his response to the state assembly before they proceed with articles of impeachment, he may resign that day. He will try and use the time to see if there's any response that would be acceptable. But at the end of the day, he cannot go down in history as the Cuomo that was impeached.
So you think that will push him? That might be the one thing that pushes him to resign, avoiding being impeached.
It's the only thing. And if it's not on the 13th, it will be 2 or 3 days before the impeachment vote will happen. He will not be impeached.
Susan, you finish your piece writing, what must really be examined if we're to make progress is the culture of the workplace. Reflecting back, it's easy to see how the culture allowed the governor's behavior to exist and fester and sometimes hide in plain sight. Fear does that. Look, this isn't just an issue in Governor Cuomo's office or in Albany or even in politics. There are working women all across our country dealing with hostile environments day in and day out. Many companies and offices and government offices are really trying to change that, but some are still ignoring it. Some of them aren't even aware that it's going on. So where do we start? How do we begin to affect real change here so that we don't hear reports like this any longer?
Well, fortunately, the environment's a little bit different than it was 20, 30 years ago, or even 5 years ago, for that matter. Yeah. You have to call it out. And if it doesn't happen within your human resources department, you go online, you start making noise as much as you can to call out the bad behavior. And let me say this, it's not just about women and their experience. I saw the governor make grown men cry. I mean, it's unbelievable. When you have toxicity in your workplace, you must call it out. It is unacceptable for people to treat each other like that. And if now, given the way social media works and the attention you can get to it, do it, because it will make a difference.
Susan, thanks for your reflection. Thanks so much for sharing your experience with us. Always great to have you on, but especially on something so personal like this.
Thank you, Allison.
The 3 former Minneapolis police officers charged with violating George Floyd's civil rights want separate federal trials from Derek Chauvin. He was convicted back in April on state murder charges for kneeling on Floyd's neck. NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner is here with me now. Glenn, attorneys for those 3 officers said in court filings that their clients would be unfairly prejudiced if they went to trial alongside Chauvin. Kung's attorney said the jurors will not be able to follow the court's instructions and compartmentalize the evidence. Do you think they have a strong argument here?
You know, they have a pretty weak argument, Allison. Co-defendants are tried together in courts in every jurisdiction in this country every single day. The rule is that if two defendants or more are indicted together as co-defendants, charged together, they're going to be tried together. But I will tell you, every co-defendant case I handle, the defendants will always file a motion to sever. That's for two reasons. One, if the judge rules against the motion to sever, that gives them something to appeal. Doesn't mean it will be a winning issue on appeal, but it is another issue they get to appeal. But more importantly, the defendants want to be tried separately because what they want to do is sit in the courtroom by themselves in front of a jury and say, I'm not really the bad guy. I'm not the one who caused the death of George Floyd. It was those other officers who were worse than me, and they're not here to be judged. Every defendant wants to avail himself of that argument. But I will say judges will ordinarily keep the defendants together unless their defenses are so contradictory that a jury would be unable to separate out the evidence of guilt and apply it only to each defendant individually.
So, Glenn, the video of Floyd's murder will likely be played during the trial. I know you're a former prosecutor, but if you could, play defense attorney for a minute. How would you argue that these three officers did not violate George Floyd's rights? What would you do if you were defending them?
First of all, that's not an enviable position to be in, to defend this kind of conduct. But defense attorneys are so important to the functioning of our criminal justice system. It's going to be a tough task because when a crime is caught on videotape and when it's actually being narrated by members of the public who are begging and pleading with the officers to get up off of George Floyd, and the officers are callously declining to do that, this is a tough case. But here's what I think the other three officers will do. You may see those three defense attorneys band together and all try to put this on Derek Chauvin. They're going to say he was the lead officer. He was the senior member of the squad. He was a training officer. Listen, they already know that he's been convicted. Now, the jury shouldn't get to know that, but these defense attorneys may, in essence, gang up the other three and try to put it all on Chauvin and try to save their own clients.
It is an unenviable task, tough job they have indeed, as you said. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on and helping us understand this one better.
Thank you, Allison.
It's time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Are we seeing some green shoots in the U.S. labor market's recovery from the pandemic? Weekly jobless claims dropping to 385,000. That's the exact number that Dow Jones expected. Meanwhile, Fed Vice Chair Richard Clarida hinting interest rates could go up by early 2023, but only if we meet some key job and inflation targets. And we have a special treat for you today. Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver, 2 days in a row. We got him Thursday and Friday. So, Caleb, thanks for being with us on a Thursday for a change. Let's start with those weekly jobless claims. They've basically hovered around 400,000, give or take, since mid-May. But there were some good signs in this report on long-term unemployment. Tell us about that and how the Delta variant is affecting the jobs market and its recovery.
Great to be with you as always. So 385,000 jobless claims in the last week still sounds very high, but we're in that range. You're right, 375 to 410,000 over the past several weeks. We still have a lot of folks out of work. 7.13 million people who were working before the pandemic began are still not working now. But the jobless claims did show us that continuing claims, people have been unemployed for a long time. That number continues to drop. And that's what we like to see, especially going into tomorrow's key July jobs report, which should show anywhere from, 350,000 to 900,000 job gains. Economists are all over the place because the labor market's in a weird, squishy place right now where companies need workers, but folks aren't ready to get back into the workforce. And now there's the Delta variant, which is causing a pause on both sides.
Yeah, so let's talk more about this squishy place because everyone's watching that July jobs report tomorrow. It's a big thing. So what are you watching for there? How do you determine whether it's a good or bad report with estimates all over like that?
Well, we want to see a lot of job gains. We want to see, hundreds of thousands, 700,000 or more job gains to get us back on pace so we can start to chip away at that high unemployment rate and get some of these folks back into the workforce. You want to see that. You want to see the labor force participation rate rise. That has been very low, down around 61% for the last several months. We want to see that go up to 63, 64%, where it traditionally, historically lies.
Okay.
We also want to make sure wages keep rising. Wages are very important. They've been rising over the past few months. We want to see a continuation of that.
All right, so bottom line, I think the theme tomorrow is more, right? We want to see more money for people. We want to see more jobs, and we want to see more participation. I guess you could say there's no such thing as too much here.
No, we want the full ice cream sundae, lots of jobs, a falling unemployment rate, more participation, rising wages. Give us the Jim Dandy. We can take it.
Sprinkles on top, please. All right, I got to ask you about the Fed vice chair, because he's kind of laying out the timeline for when we might see our next interest rate hike. But Caleb, help me out here. The Fed has basically been eyeing 2023 for its next move on interest rates for a little while now. So why are people paying attention to his comments? What's fresh here?
Well, he's speaking, and he's actually on his way out as one of the Fed chairs because his term's ending soon. But he's speaking out because they're telegraphing as much as they can when they're going to hike interest rates. They don't want it to come as a shock to the U.S. economy. It's the worst kept secret in the United States and probably the world right now. They've said 2023, but they're also tying it to making sure unemployment gets dealt with. They want full employment, which is 3 to 4% unemployment, and they want inflation to be above its target of 2% because it's been stubbornly low. Don't tell that to anybody buying goods and services right now. Inflation was 3.5% in just the past month. So, but they don't think it's going to stay there, but they're trying to thread that fine needle there to make sure that people are working and that there is pricing power for companies because that's how companies grow. So they're trying to do that. And that's why they keep hammering that 2023, if and only if the economy is at that full sail that they're targeting.
We love specificity when it comes to the Fed. We want to know exactly and we want to know when. So glad that they're giving us some more details. Caleb, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Of course. See you tomorrow.
Let's bring in 5-time Olympic medalist Justin Gatlin. Justin, great to have you back on the show. Mental health, a big theme at the Tokyo Olympics. Noah Lyles talking about bringing that conversation to an even bigger audience. How important are the mental health talks we're having right now in sports? And would these conversations have helped you when you were competing in the Olympics?
Exactly. I mean, it's a very big thing to be able to have mental health. You have to train your mind just as much as you have to train your body. Michael Phelps said that, to be great, you have to be locked in, you have to be focused, and you have to go out there knowing that the whole weight of the world is on you.
We have to talk about the men's 4x100-meter relay team. They didn't qualify for the final after botching a handoff. Track legend Carl Lewis with a pretty harsh tweet about their performance, writing, "The USA team did everything wrong in the men's relay. It was clear that there was no leadership. It was a total embarrassment and completely unacceptable for USA team to look worse than the AAU kids I saw." Justin, you were on the silver medal winning relay team in the 2004 Olympics. What happened there? Do you agree with Carl's assessment?
I have to disagree for the most part because those guys work very hard to get to where they are. And I was on a team with them in 2019 where we won the gold and we broke the American record at the World Championships. It's a brotherhood, and you have to believe and rely on each other. And I think we need more practice. We need to have better routine. We need to have synergy, Allison. We need to come out there and not rely on just speed to get it done. You have a lot of other countries out there who are getting the job done and getting on the podium, and they're nowhere near as fast as Team USA.
Justin, the men's track team has a chance at redemption in the 4x400-meter relay. Michael Cherry, Michael Norman both missed out on medals in today's 400-meter final, but they are running in that relay on Saturday. What are their chances of getting a medal there? You think they got a shot?
I want to bet on them, because this is a tradition that we have at Team USA is for the 4x4 to go out there and do it. You've had guys from way back, who have brought together and had a great quartet to be able to bring back gold. This tradition should live on, and these guys should be able to get it done. Once again, it's about the mental part. These guys are young, and Team USA is young. The physical part is handled. Now let's get our minds ready to go out there and perform at the top level that we know you can.
Well, look, you said it's mental. I really appreciate your optimism. Maybe if they know that we're all rooting for them, we believe they could do it, they'll go out and get it. Justin, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Allison.
A new clue in the search for a link between some dog foods and a deadly canine heart disease, thanks to researchers at Tufts University. One of those researchers joining me now, Dr. Lisa Freeman, a board-certified veterinary nutritionist and professor at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University. Sounds like a dream job to me. I would love to spend my time hanging out with pets all day long. Dr. Freeman, like a lot of dog owners, I switched my dog Roosevelt off of grain-free food because of the concerns about that deadly heart disease. But at the time, we didn't really understand what was causing the problem. What did you find?
Well, we still don't have the exact cause of this problem. This is the dilated cardiomyopathy associated with diet, has been investigated for the last several years by the FDA and a lot of investigators. And, you know, some of the obvious causes have been ruled out. So we felt we needed some novel approaches to investigating this issue. So I've been working with collaborators who are experts in metabolomics, and this is a way to measure small molecules and identify markers of disease in diet. It's usually done in blood and urine, but we did it slightly differently and actually looked in the diets themselves. And what was really interesting is that when we compared diets that have been associated with DCM, we found specific biochemical compounds that differed from more traditional diets. And these are compounds that we can now investigate further. And we also narrowed down the ingredients that differentiated the DCM-associated diets from more typical diets. And we found that peas were the key ingredients that were contributing to the differences in compounds. So this really helps us target our next steps in our research.
It sure does. And peas of all things. So, Dr. Freeman, just so people understand, what happens if a dog gets canine dilated cardiomyopathy, or DCM for short? And we've been showing video of so many different types of dogs. Are there certain breeds that are at greater risk here that maybe those owners should be especially aware?
Well, DCM is not a new disease. It's a severe heart disease. It affects dogs and also can affect people as well. It's actually the second most common heart disease in dogs, and it's very common in certain breeds, large and giant breed dogs like Doberman Pinschers and Great Danes. And it's a disease that can cause the heart to enlarge and for the heart muscle to not contract very well. So it can result in coughing or difficulty breathing, collapse, or even sudden death. And what we have known about for DCM for many, many years is that it's a progressive disease that doesn't improve. And what's different about this diet-associated DCM is that any breed of dog can get it, and that when the diet is changed, the heart can actually improve. So it's very different from what we think of as the typical DCM.
So based on the new findings and the information that you've gathered so far, what are you recommending that dog owners do? What kind of food should they buy? Because anytime we hear that our beloved pets might be at risk, we want to change anything that could be putting them in danger or harmful to their health. So what would you say to dog owners now who just want to make sure they're doing right by their pets?
Of course, we all want to do the best for our pets. I'm a pet owner too. And, you know, I see this as one more piece of the puzzle that gets us closer to solving the problem. I wish I had the absolute answer. This literally is keeping me up at night. But, you know, I think in selecting a diet, I always recommend that pet owners talk to their veterinarians about what the best diet is for that individual animal. But in general, I recommend pet foods made by well-established manufacturers that have strong nutrition expertise and rigorous quality control procedures, and that contain common, well-researched ingredients, including grains. And, you know, until we know more, I recommend avoiding diets that are high in peas, lentils, and other pulses, as well as potatoes and sweet potatoes. But always talk to your veterinarian about the best diet for your dog.
Well, great advice, and it comforts me that that is the advice that we got from our vet, so I feel like we're at least on the right track. Dr. Freeman, thank you so much for the important research you're doing to keep our pets healthier, and thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Peak hurricane season begins in just a matter of days, and after a fairly quiet July, forecasters are saying this season is about to get really busy. NBC News meteorologist Janessa Webb shows us what to expect.
Hi, Allison. Yes, we do have a big-time update from the National Hurricane Center. 2021 Atlantic hurricane season will definitely be revving up here. Now the forecast, 65% chance at an above normal season, and this is the 6th consecutive year. Now, our original forecast was calling for about 13 to 20 named storms, now 15 to 21, and really keeping an eye on these major hurricanes, 3 to 5. So that's consistent from the earlier outlook, but we're really going to start seeing things rev up pretty early, and we've already had 5 named storms. So we're watching 2 areas of low pressure that are already starting to really pick up. The National Hurricane Center calling for a 20 to 40% chance of formation in the next 5 days. So the season continues to pick up earlier and earlier each year, but it's really time for people to start preparing.